No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. My name is Kaitlin Moose, and this is 50 Shades of Great. Those famous words were spoken by Eleanor Roosevelt, an incredible woman who redefined the role of First Lady as someone who can have their own political and charitable agenda, a true humanitarian concerned with the needs of the people, rather than merely playing hostess in a high-class society. This was a recurring theme throughout her life that led to her leadership in creating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a United Nations document that spelled out the fundamental rights of every human being on Earth. So I've been putting off this video, not because I don't like Eleanor Roosevelt, for the exact opposite reason. There's just so much to research and learn about her, and I'm just afraid that I won't be able to do her justice in a little short video like this. I mean, I went to a lecture about her, I read a couple of biographies, including her own autobiography, and I went to a really cool presentation. Here in my city, there's a group called Chautauqua, and they do History Alive performances. So someone was dressed up as Eleanor Roosevelt and gives a presentation about her life, and then the audience is able to ask her questions. So that was really cool. I'll put a link in the description for that. Anyways, I'll do my best to include everything I can to have an accurate representation. So Eleanor was born in 1884 and brought up in high-class New York society. But she was a really shy and serious child, so much so that her own mother referred to her as Granny. And she says her mother was the most beautiful woman in the world, and she was made to feel very aware that she was very plain looking. Growing up in a society where beauty was everything, since she didn't have beauty, which was made very clear to her by her mother and others, that she would have to have manners in order to get by. So she always wanted attention and admiration because she was made to feel that she would never deserve it. She definitely never got those things from her mother, and so she loved getting to spend time with her father. Unfortunately, her mother passed away when she was just 8 years old, and then her father died the very next year from alcoholism. So by age 10, she was orphaned and sent to live with her grandmother. And she really romanticized the relationship she had with her father, even though in reality he was never really there for her. He was an unreliable alcoholic. But she created this version of him for herself and has said that she even imagined that they had an even closer relationship after he passed away. At age 15, she sailed to England with her aunt and attended Allenswood, that was right outside of London. And there, her knowledge of French and her ability to speak her mind and converse on various topics made her a favorite with the headmistress. I'm gonna butcher this name because I do not speak French. Madame Souvestre, maybe? I'll put it here. But this woman taught her many progressive ideas about being a strong, independent woman in the world. And so her time at Allenswood, she really traveled a lot, learned a lot about different people, and was made to be aware of these different kinds of ideas, and really grew into herself and her personality. So if you're wondering how all the Roosevelts are connected, she was in fact born Eleanor Roosevelt. Her uncle was President Theodore Roosevelt, and that was her dad's older brother. And she married her fifth cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who then later became president also. So that's the Roosevelt clan. FDR asked her to marry him when she was just 19 years old, and his mother really disapproved. She tried to dissuade him, but eventually they were married. But Eleanor's mother-in-law, Sarah, was still very controlling of her son, and then eventually by marriage, Eleanor. So Franklin and Eleanor ended up having 6 children, and Eleanor didn't know anything about cooking or child rearing, so she let her mother-in-law take charge. And her mother-in-law hired a nurse to take care of the babies. And Eleanor said it never even occurred to her to learn how to do these things for herself because she hadn't been raised in that kind of society. Which I thought was a really interesting look at that time period and what that high society life must have been like. So at the same time, FDR became really interested in politics, and he was a New York State Senator and then the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and Eleanor said, "I will learn about politics. It is a wife's duty to be interested in whatever interests her husband." The U.S. entered World War I on April 6, 1917, and she began to organize all different kinds of charity work. She took shifts at the Red Cross, she visited hospitals, anything she could do to help. And in that process of helping others, she became less shy and able to interact with other people, and also tolerant of people from different walks of life. Then, in 1921, FDR was struck with infantile paralysis, which many people know today as polio, and his legs became paralyzed. So that meant that this disease very quickly changed their lives. And FDR's mom wanted him to give up politics. She said, you should just retire to the country, become a country gentleman. And Eleanor really had to fight. That was the first time she fought against her mother-in-law and said, no, he needs to go into politics. That's where he's happy. And she finally was able to convince Franklin. And he became governor of New York. And Eleanor continued all kinds of outreach and was involved in the League of Women Voters and the Women's Trade Union League. She loved being involved. But when FDR was elected president and took office in 1933, she said, quote, I was happy for my husband, but for myself I was deeply troubled. As I saw it, this meant the end of any personal life of my own. Of course, that was during the Great Depression, and FDR implemented the New Deal to create jobs and stabilize the economy. And Franklin sent Eleanor around the country to be his eyes and legs so that she could witness firsthand and report back to him what the conditions were actually like, how the New Deal was working, and how people were reacting to it. And she says it was the best education of her life because she met so many different people and heard their stories, especially from the working class, and really became a voice for the people. She didn't always agree with her husband's political stances or his policies, and she was able to voice her opinion and say so. She pushed for an anti-lynching bill as well as to remove the poll tax, but that never became must legislation for the political climate. She wrote a daily column called My Day that informed the public, sort of like a blog, on her daily thoughts and activities in the White House. She held press conferences for only women reporters in order to provide job opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. She organized garden parties for political women and other wives of the government officials. And she still continued to travel the country. She even made headlines when she went down into a coal mine and listened to the miners talk about their working conditions and seeing it firsthand. This wasn't something that was done. So she became the source of a lot of controversy. Many people criticized her actions, saying that her racial beliefs, she fought for equality and was a civil rights activist, and also that her social work would hurt FDR's presidency. That clearly wasn't the case, as FDR was elected to an unprecedented 4 terms in office. But this behavior was so different for someone in the First Lady position, to voice her own opinions and be constantly working. I mean, people said that she just had this limitless energy and was that way up until her dying day. So then December 7th, 1941 was the attacks on Pearl Harbor, and the U.S. entered World War II. In her autobiography, she recounts that they had this secret visit from Winston Churchill, and she again was trying to do everything that she could to help. She ended up visiting soldiers in hospitals abroad and collecting names and addresses of their families so that she could write to them when she returned home. Going through all of that and seeing the effects made her really question war and that path, so she vowed to fight for peace. So FDR died in 1945. All of a sudden she was on her own. There were a lot of uncertainties, but she said a quote of things that she was certain of. I did not want to run an elaborate household again. I did not want to cease being useful in some way. I did not want to feel old. President Truman ended up asking her to be a delegate for the United Nations, and so she worked there to make a difference. She visited post-World War II Germany and again got these anti-war feelings that there must be something better that we can do. She says, quote, nothing could better illustrate the sickening waste and destructiveness and futility of war than what I was seeing. She said, war really isn't the answer. We need to be able to sit down with these international leaders and have a conversation to come up with a solution. And she really worked to live her life that way and lead by example. She then became the U.S. representative to the Human Rights Commission. And after years of deliberation and back and forth and changing words so that they would fit in other languages, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on December 10th, 1948. This was the first time that there was a global acceptance of what are fundamental human rights that should be protected. And she never slowed down. In all her life, she just kept extremely busy, kept moving forward, until finally in 1962, she died at age 78. Just so many incredible accomplishments from such an incredible woman. I've always been inspired by some of her famous quotes, and that's basically what inspired me to research her for this project. So I wanted to share a couple of those quotes in a video that I'll post next, but I will end this one here for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Eleanor Roosevelt in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time for another 50 Shades of Great.